gingerbread. Soft, leather black fondant icing. This isn't just Christmas food. This is S&M Christmas food. So I hope that worked and that you could see the hilarious M&S Christmas parody, Christmas food parody that I did just there. Hello Avianda, thank you very much for joining me on the stream this evening. Welcome, welcome. What a week. So yeah, apologies for the delayed stream for those of you who tuned in on Wednesday. Hey, hey Dampier, hi Shell, thank you very much for joining me this evening. Thank you so much. I am absolutely over the moon. Yeah. Shell says, yes, a heck of a week, and I 100% agree. So a lot of my home automation doesn't work. An astonishing amount of my home was set up. For somebody who is like as loudly anti-AI as I am, I have a lot of tiny robots that control my home. And after the power cut, they didn't want to control my home anymore. At all. So I have to manually turn the light purple and put the light on in here. So do bear with me. I hope you did enjoy, if you caught it, that you did enjoy the parody advert, because I very much enjoyed it, and I know that it's very much UK culture, so I'm not sure who's aware of the Marks and Spencer's adverts that I was parodying, but it was very funny. I think I'm funny. That's the important thing, right? This will help. I feel like I'm actually doing a stream. There we go. I have to do this stuff manually. It's not on. I'm used to having my robots. It's much slower when I have to do it myself. See? I look like myself again now. Thank you very much, Shell. The kids had an amazing time. They got laptops that they probably shouldn't have, that they still haven't opened, but they have played a lot with the Lego that I got them off eBay. They really, their favorite. I'm really pleased that their favorite bit this year was doing mitzvah. So we took little hampers around to the old people. Katrina, thank you for joining us. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited that you're here. So we're having a very special stream today. We have some books. Look at this. This is the second book ever allowed at my desk, because I don't normally allow paper here. And the third. And of course everybody has seen the first book ever allowed on my desk. So look at this. Look at these beautiful books by beautiful people. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to read a little bit about about kitchens. So for those of you who aren't aware, I started my career in the land of very sharp knives and very hot stoves. You can absolutely give me a shout out any way you want, Katrina. This is a not-for-profit stream. This is not about making money. I'm just reading beautiful stories while I help my voice get better. Having been very, very sick, so you can give us a shout out wherever you want. But as you can see, this is not an affiliate stream. So if people want to come and hear it, absolutely. And if you enjoy my reading, then that even better. But your audiobook was, it's top notch. So I'm sure you are by far the more astounding professional. So we can stop pretending. I was gonna go through Once Upon a Cookbook, which is my own share of my own foray into kitchens and such, but I think we all know what everybody's here for. So we'll be reading an excerpt of Chapter 1 from Knives, Seasoning and a Dash of Love by Katrina Kwan. Look at this cover. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how beautiful this book is? Just this physical gorgeousness of a book. Look at that. I mean, it was not as perfect as it was. I've read it a few times. but look at this book. It's just a gorgeous book. And yeah, Viv did an astonishing job with the cover. Just, it's so pretty. Like, obviously, we have been spoiled on the stream with great covers before, obviously. But yeah, I'm going to read from a book because it feels lovely. And there's the most. I'm gonna have a sappy moment and say that there is the most beautiful dedication. In the front of this. Sorry, Katrina, but I am going to be sappy for a moment. To 25-year-old me, I'm glad you're still with us. It really does get better. For those who need it, dial 988 for Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You're not alone. In the UK, that's 111. Control. That's what he likes most about running his own kitchen. Everything has a place. Everyone has their roles to fulfill. Everything is measured and timed and seasoned. Perfection. He expects nothing less. He likes his knives dangerously sharp. It's more dangerous to work with a dull blade. And he likes his waiters to pick up orders the second the plates hit the line. He's never bothered with a chef's hat because they're quite frankly pompous as fuck. And it's hot enough in here as it is. He keeps his apron clean and the sleeves of his black chef jacket rolled up to just below his elbows. Trained at the prestigious Galland School of Culinary Arts with 3 Michelin stars under his belt, he's the pristine image of the world-class chef everyone believes him to be. He's the great and mighty head chef at La Rouge, Alexander Chen. But right now he's stressed as fuck, and boy howdy does his kitchen staff know it. What the hell is this? He asked, his voice booming over the roar of hood fans and sizzling skillets while the noises of the kitchen don't stop, the talking does. None of the other chefs dare make a peep. A steak? Peter answers evenly, though the hard set of his jaw betrays his cool tone. Alexander stiffens, staring down his nose at the rôtisseur. He lowers his voice, quieter than before, somehow more frightening than when he was yelling. I don't want to make a parody of myself, Dren, but if this steak were any rarer, it'd still be alive on a damn pasture. The table wants it cooked well done. Peter looks like he wants to cry. Embarrassing for a man in his mid-30s, but alas, Alexander has that effect on people. These are prime triple A. Just look at the marbling, cooking them all the time. An absolute travesty and a crime against God. I know, but it's what the customer wants. Do it again. I need another one on the fly. Peter gestures to the stove beside him in a huff. My station's already swamped. I've been trying... I don't need your excuses. I need a cook who can do their damn job. Freddie the patissier hesitantly clears his throat. Chef? Alexander turns one swift motion, the movement both effortlessly aggressive and smooth. He's an owl making a pinpoint turn mid-air to lay its sights on new prey. Freddie's only a few inches shorter than Alexander and just as broad. Nevertheless, he tries and fails to hide a grimace. New hires here for the sous chef position. Alexander's nostrils flare. What's sous chef? It's at that exact moment Alexander spots movement from his periphery. All he catches is a glimpse, but it's more than enough. A wisp of light brown hair, tan skin, the worn-down fabric of a white chef's coat that's seen better days. Then he remembers. Alexander's last sous chef, Mitchell, left almost a week ago. He hadn't even bothered to tell Alexander he quit in person. The snivelling weasel had stuffed his resignation letter into the pocket of one of Alexander's spare aprons. That was that. Couldn't handle the demands of the job, apparently. Very few can. Alexander can't say it was a surprise. It was more of an inconvenience than anything. Trying to find a replacement. Despite his confidence as a chef, he knows handling an entire kitchen like this one without a second in command would be next to impossible. There are too many moving parts, too many chefs to keep in line. This kind of work requires a divide and conquer approach, hence the last-minute hire. The new hire that's now staring up at him expectantly, something oddly familiar about her, but Alexander can't quite figure out why. "You're not what I was expecting," Alexander states. He half expected to blanch or flush or quiver like a mouth beneath his intense scrutiny. Alexander's more than aware of the kind of effect he has on people. The kitchen is his kingdom, and as head chef, he's the rightful king. Go by the book. I want to keep reading, and I want to keep reading, and I want to keep reading, because I want to read you the whole book, but that's not okay, because go by the book. There are, if you are in the UK, I think that might just be you and I, Dampiers, that bought 3 of them. To be fair, I did buy one for my mum and one for my friend Helen, as well as the digital copy and my paper copy and my other paper copy that I still have to go and pick up because Waterstones are being an arse. Reading copies and lending copies are a thing, Silent Dave. Thank you very much. I might lend you this. I think you might like it. So everybody should be aware that Silent Dave is the reason that I'm here today, because Silent Dave did distance tech support from his mum's kitchen last night to make sure my computer worked. Every time I see anything about the bear, I think about knife seasoning and a dash of love. I genuinely think I should probably watch the bear. Avienda says, "Thank you, Dave." Thank you, Silent Dave. Everybody say, "Thank you, Silent Dave." Dampier says, B&N cancelled my pre-order. What was I supposed to do? I have ebook, my no one else can touch it copy. And one for lending. Silent Dave, this isn't me attending because naughty books. This is me attending because decent streaming quality, honest to gov. Dampier says, "Thank you, Silent Dave." He's an absolute rock star. Just an absolute gentleman in a world where I genuinely thought no such thing exists. There is Silent Dave. So, our second novel of this evening. So, sorry about this, Avienda, because I know that romance novels aren't your thing. But this is the book that turned me onto romance novels. So I got this book well over 15, probably closer to 20 years ago, in the post. And it's by Kathy Yardley, who wrote Role Playing. She's very much one of us. But I got this through, you used to be able to sign up to get Harlequin romance novels in the post, and somebody signed me up as a joke because I didn't read romance novels, and it was funny. So they signed me up for a laugh, and I got this through the post, and I will read the back of the Bleach label. I will read anything. I can't help it. If there's something in front of me to read, I will read it. And I got books in the post, and I can't remember what the other one was. That's gone by and by to a charity shop or passed on to somebody else. But this book has stayed with me, not only because it is the first romance novel that I ever really enjoyed, and I would imagine that that's to do with the plot synopsis, and I'll read that in a second. this genuinely is a true gem dump here. You're right. Some of those Harlequin novels are true gems, and this really was. It has some of the most genuinely sexy sex I've ever read. So I was looking at it, and I reached out recently on Twitter and went, wait. Thank you, Silent Dave. It was all down that hill for that. I read a lot of things. I don't just read romance novels. I just like romance novels. So I reached out to the author and said, thank you for writing this thing, because they wrote a book called Role Playing. And for those who are not aware, I do board gaming, I do role playing. I'm a big old screaming nerd. So I'd read it and I really enjoyed it. Role playing is a great, twisty, fun. It's a romance adjacent book. Like, the relationship is, it's on par with the main plot, but it's not the main plot. And much like Aviander's book, actually, if you haven't read Aviander's book, please do, because it's a stonking novel. Home is Where the Heart Lies, where there's a romance, but that's not the core of the book. And role playing's a bit like that. Like, there's a romance, and it's pitched as a romance, but it's a binary story. Guilty Pleasures is a romance, and for years I said it was my guilty pleasure. But when I was reading it, I was like, this is familiar. The dialogue, the style is familiar, and of course it's the same author. So I reached out to her and went, thank you. And then I asked, can I read an excerpt of this incredibly sexy book on my stream? And Kathy said yes. So I always say thank you so much to any author who will have me read their stories on my stream. It's an enormous privilege to be the voice of somebody else's imagination. There's nothing quite like that feeling. Kathy with a C, Kathy Yardley. And if you look at the adverts that I put out on Twitter, Kathy, I have put her. This is getting better, Avienda. Kathy, Cathy, Kathy Yardley. So I'm going to flip to what is my favourite scene. But firstly, I'm going to read you the synopsis. Essential feast from the wickedest menu that you've ever seen. Mary Salazar has to get her act together, otherwise her backstreet restaurant will quickly become a been there, done that kind of thing. She risked everything to create her place, Guilty Pleasures, and she's willing to risk everything all over again just to save it. She doesn't have a plan, but she does have Nick Avery, a super sexy chef looking for a second chance. Once a 4-star reputation, now a no-star, thanks to a long-time rival. When Nick shows up at Mari's doorstep, she knows it means trouble, and not just for her restaurant either. Soon she's not only sampling the delectable dishes, she's sampling the chef himself. Together they cook up a sinful menu that garners many new patrons, but when opportunity knocks on Nick's door with high-class offers, he must decide, as will Murray, what and who they truly desire. One of the things I like about this story is that it's not a will they, won't they all the way along. They're gonna. I mean, not just it's a romance book, they're gonna. He turns up and she's got this fab little funky backstreet restaurant, and it's failing. And restaurants do, even good ones. And he turns up and he offers, he offers the world on a platter, and she can't get why he's there, but their shared mentor recommends him. And he immediately pitches to say, I will help you with the menu. They do not fight crime, Silent Dave. They make beautiful, beautiful food together, which is better. But yeah, thrown now. I'm not good at this. the crime of fast food. Dave says, sorry, it's always my brain, where my brain goes when someone says he's a, she's a. Together they make sexy, sexy food. I will not spoil the climax of the book. Seriously, you can still get this book. Go on Amazon, get the book. Go. Or to a real bookshop. Like, there's this incredible tension. Just to go back to Knife Seasoning Love for a second, there's this incredible tension all the way through that. You don't have that tension in this book. They fuck really quickly. So I'm gonna. He's volunteered to help with the menu. She says no. Then she goes and talks to her accountant and goes, and then she says yes. Yeah. Knife Seasoning and a Dash of Love, lots of tension. This book, that's not the tension. The tension isn't will be. The tension is very much will they continue to? Will they manage to stay together despite the fact that they are both ambitious? And honestly, it's very true of the catering industry. Everybody fucks everybody else in the catering industry. That's why I wanted to do this as a theme, because it is a sexy theme. So she's agreed to go to his place to look at his menu. She's hired him on at base. She's hired him on at basically minimum wage. Which, despite the fact that he's got this like epic reputation because something has happened, and Mari has had a restaurant fail, so she's quite sensitive to that. So we're starting in, we're about halfway through chapter 2. Nick followed Mari to the industrial-looking brick building across the street. It looked like it had lofts or those workspaces. Is she taking me to where she lives then? Is that what all the grinning in the kitchen had been about? Not that he would have minded accompanying this particular woman home. It had been months since he'd broken up with Janelle, and it hadn't lasted long. He really hadn't had the time or the inclination to be with a woman since. And Mari was a woman, with a capital W. He could tell from the easy stride of her gait that she moved with determination and a very seductive grace. Still, she could move like an exotic dancer and look like a sexual goddess, he thought, as he walked up those 2 flights of stairs that led to her place. The fact that she'd made him try out to work in her dubious restaurant, now that he'd proven how capable he was. It was her turn. As the movie said, she had to show him the money, and he might be available, but if he ever wanted to get his place back in the restaurant, well, he wasn't going to come cheap. She unlocked the door and turned on a light, and he followed her inside. He didn't know what he was expecting, but the roomy loft wasn't it. It was painted in rich autumn hues, so the ceiling I'll try that again. It was painted in rich autumn hues, though the ceiling still showed exposed steel beams. The main room was painted in a warm pumpkin tone, rich and exotic. There was colourful forest green and burgundy tapestry throws over an overstuffed couch. He walked to the centre of the living room, where she went to a large oak desk strewn with paper. There was a small but well-appointed kitchen, he noticed, and suspended over it was a floor about 7 feet up with a ladder leading up to it. While someone probably had used it for storage before, from this vantage point he could make out some gauzy type material. Curtains and pillows. That's where she sleeps. He felt the slight stirrings of an erection, not what he needed to go into a negotiation with. He turned and looked at the huge floor-to-ceiling windows instead. The neighbourhood wasn't much to look at, but he had a view at the signs wink and grin. Then when he felt he had his body under control, he focused on the live model instead, and almost promptly wished he hadn't. She reached up and pulled her hair from its restraining rubber band, letting it tumble across her shoulders in unruly ebony waves. The purple streak seemed to fit the room, he noted, and matched the violet blue of her eyes. She was a powerfully beautiful woman. So She leaned back against the desk, her long legs crossing at the ankle. Why won't anybody else hire you, Nick Avery? He took in a deep breath, a beautiful, no punches pulled kind of woman. I told you I need a change. Her eyebrows arched up. I didn't just come in off the bus from the country, Nick. He sighed. He knew it wasn't going to be that easy. He hadn't been anywhere else, and with a woman this sharp, he shouldn't have tried. I left Le Chapeau Noir in less than ideal circumstances. I gathered, she said dryly. She paused. Embezzlement? No. The word was harsh, but the idea of it punched him in the gut. The thought about sitting, but no. He didn't want to get too comfortable. There were no legal charges filed. She narrowed her eyes now, crossing her arms, and he saw the look they'd been getting in every other interview with Bim for the past month. What exactly did you do? I trusted my friend and got screwed. He clenched his jaw, forced himself to relax. He was at the end of the line. I supposedly stole from the restaurant thousands of dollars worth of food, comp meals, equipment. Someone suggested I had my hand in the till, but wouldn't go that far. The someone had been Philip Marceau, his business partner and best friend. I see. Her expression changed, but he couldn't read it. He waited for more, for judgment, but none came. She simply studied him silently. I didn't do any of it. As the words were out, he winced. He hadn't defended himself against Philip's whispered allegations, hinted at by people he interviewed with, because he knew the fraternity of high society four-star restaurants would take the word of the powerful Marceau restaurant family over the word of a one-time poor kid from Covina. So why had he wanted her to know he was innocent? They didn't press charges? She asked instead. No, they didn't. My old business partner said they were doing it to protect my reputation, because I'd meant so much to his family. He didn't mean for that bitterness to creep into his voice, but he couldn't seem to help it. And you tried here? Because of Leon, he reminded her. He smiled, thinking of the conversation, and she picked up on it. What? He shrugged. He said this was a good place for me to get a second chance, that's all. Leon had been a tough teacher, but he had to admit the man was a good friend. And right now, Nick was in a short supply of those. The look on her expressive face was something to see. He said that? The part about second chances? Nick nodded, puzzled. She started laughing, though her brilliant eyes didn't reflect the humour. That crafty old bastard. Sorry. Okay, Nick Avery. She rumpled her hair, took in a deep breath. You're hired. He smiled, feeling his shoulders release the tension. You won't regret it. See that I don't, she said, then stood up, smiling at him almost flirtatiously. Of course, I can only offer base scale. He blinked. He took a step closer to her, keeping the leash on his anger. I think I'm worth more than that, he said, his voice low and reasonable. Give me a few weeks, and I'm sure I could convince you that I am. She took a step to meet him, a smile not wavering. Oh, I'm sure you're worth more than that. His body was responding again, but he ignored it and focused on his anger instead. But you know I can't get a job anywhere else, no. That managed to irk her. I don't do that, she said, her voice sharp, her eyes snapping with electricity. I wouldn't do that. But the facts are the facts. I'm taking a risk here. I want to give you a second chance, but I've got to protect myself and my restaurant. He grimaced at that. Maybe we could negotiate, he said in his best charm the owner voice. Well, maybe we could. She got a lick of innocent thoughtfulness, but his guard immediately went up. but I'd have to be sure. Say a 3-month trial period? Another trial period, just when he thought things couldn't get any more insulting. She leaned forward slightly, her mouth carving into a very sweet, sexy smile. 3 months in my kitchen. That's not a very long time, is it? She winked. I'll even go easy on you. He found himself mesmerized by her body language and shook it off. Miss Salazar, he said, pitching his own voice low and husky. Are you trying to con me? She blinked and let out a warm laugh. No, but I'll put it this way. I want you, Nick. Now his body clenched tightly. She shut her eyes, and to his surprise, he saw the dull stain of a blush high on her cheeks. She turned back to the desk. For the restaurant, she hastily amended. I think we could be very good for each other, Nick. I want to help, but I can only hire at base pay. She looked at him over her shoulder, her posture unconsciously provocative. Take it or leave it. Suddenly he wanted to take more than the job. He let out a low, quivering breath and put out his hand. I'll take it. So that is still available to buy. Guilty Pleasures by Kathy Yardley. There is a sex scene in that book that involves honey dust that, honestly, I would pay money to reenact. It's a very sexy book. Well, I try not to give away the goods when I'm reading for the novels. You know that. I try not to do it with yours, Avienda. When I'm reading for the novels, I want you to go and read the novel. I want you to go buy the books. Is there any greater feeling in this life than holding a book in your hand? It just feels so good. Excuse me while I sit here and huff the books. So, can you see, if I share my screen with you now, can you see my screen if I do this? Awesome. So this is my Once Upon a Cookbook. So I thought it was very, very fun to write a cookbook at one point. It is an AO3 tab, yes. Don't get excited, Dave. It is an AO3 here. It is an AO3 tab. This is not a sexy book. This is an interlude, because if I'm going to read from Avienda's book, then we need to not be going from sexy romance books. So this is from my own work. This is Once Upon a Cookbook. So I don't know who's familiar with the Once Upon a Time fandom, but it has a very complicated family tree, and right at the heart of it is Mr. Henry Mills. Master Henry Mills is at the point that we see this, a 12-year-old boy whose mother is the daughter of Prince Charming and Snow White, whose adopted mother is the evil queen, whose stepfather is Captain Hook, whose grandfather is Rumpelstiltskin. He has a seriously complicated family tree. So I decided I was going to make a cookbook. So this is Storybook, a family history told in recipes by Henry Mills Swan. I'm writing this as a multimedia exploration of family and community because Ms. Ursa said that my family tree gave her a headache right around when we worked out that I'm my own granduncle. This is my recipe for my mom, Emma's favorite treat. grilled cheese, 2 slices of white bread. Grandma Snow made this, but anything's fine. 50 grams of sheep cheese. Grandpa David made this on the farm. It's good, honest. 10 grams of goat's butter. Killian started off on this stuff. At least it's not fish oil. Strip bread both slices of bread with the butter. I know that seems weird, but trust me. Then slice the cheese really thin, don't grate it. That makes the bread soggy, I don't know why. Put the cheese between the 2 slices of bread and then place the sandwich in a cold pan. Put the lowest heat on under the pan and let it sit until you can see the cheese go all melty. Flip the sandwich over in the pan and then let both sides get all gold. Serve it with Granny's onion rings. Later a recipe in the book if I can talk her into it. I'm interviewing my grandfather, David Nolan, about his signature dish. This is just for school, right, Henry? Of course, Grandpa. Okay, well, I guess the secret is a dash of nutmeg. And using really fresh eggs. You know, I made these for your mom, Emma, when she moved out of the big house before we moved to the farm. She says I always make too many, but I'm not sure there's any such thing as too many pancakes. Thanks, Grandpa. Can we get to the recipe? Oh, of course, yeah. A cup of melted goat's butter, a cup of golden castor sugar, 2 medium eggs, a cup of hazelnut milk, a dash of nutmeg, a cup of sifted white flour, a pinch of sea salt, a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda, the juice of a small lemon, around a 1/4 cup. Mix the butter and sugar, add the eggs one at a time, whisking thoroughly, and add the milk and whisk until all frothy. This is where I add the nutmeg so it can infuse the liquid ingredients. Sift in the flour a bit at a time to keep the mixture smooth. Add the salt and the bicarb. Microwave your lemon for about 20 seconds. Grandpa really did this. It was weird, but when he cut the lemon, a ton of juice came out, so I guess it works. Whisk the lemon juice in really quickly. You'll see the batter react. Set your pan or griddle on a low heat, and then add the mixture in 1 tablespoon dollops, smoothing them so they look a bit pancakey. Look, Miss Ursa, I know that's not a word, but that's how Grandpa talks, and the story's about him and not the pancakes, right? The pancakes are very tender, so don't just flip them over until the tiny bubbles will level the pancakes, not just at the edges, and keep the temperature low. You can butter your skillet if you like the crispy edge, but I like them fluffy. I checked with Grandma Snow, and she says you can't withhold my grade until you try the pancakes. Miss Ursa, sorry. Thank you, Amanda. I wanted to get that kind of narrative flow, like the way that little kids will write up an interview. And these are my recipes, and these are genuinely pictures of what I cooked. Dave's probably sat there going, wait, I recognise that plate. These are, the pictures are from my kitchen. Because, I like to cook. There is a recipe for onion rings, but you have to go and look on the fic if you want to. If you want the recipe for onion rings. Pardon the typos. This is an early attempt at a multimedia fic. Okay, so we have. Gone really quickly. And come back to chatting. Oh, Dave says the pictures are of my kitchen because it's a place of joy and warmth. Thank you. So yes, and Ludmedia was this is who made your cover. I actually didn't know that, despite thinking that you're both awesome humans separately. I had not connected that this was the person. That's amazing. This cover. Look how beautiful that is. So when we're talking about kitchen fix, this came up. So this is a Raylo fic. I actually have to say that because the other fic that we have to read this evening is a San, and that was a Captain Swan fic. So we're going through all the fandoms this evening. So this isn't specifically a kitchen fic, but there is a kitchen scene in the fic. It's a bit later than I think we're going to read, but we'll see how we're doing for time. We're actually doing okay for time. Well, I'm over the moon that we could be reading your friend's fic at the end of this. This is lovely. Summary. Kid, times are going to come when you can't be bothered thinking things through. But when they do, there's a part of you that will always rise up to the occasion. And that part's got Solo branded all over it. Ben Solo is spurred by his father's words when he sees a woman clinging to a tree in the midst of a flood. With a rope and the blood of hand riding Solo in his veins, he knows he'll give anything to save her, he'll die trying. A beautiful tourist with nothing but the soggy clothes on her back and nowhere to go, Ray clings to him in desperation. As the days go by, Ray unfolds to him like a blossom in April. And it's getting so he wishes he would never have to bring her home. But does she feel the same way? Or was it all fear and necessity that landed her in his arms? All he knows is that his dark, lonely life is suddenly lit like sunshine after a storm. And he never wants to let that beautiful light go. I'm just gonna go back to 1 second. Look at this mood board. Isn't that lovely? Shell says, I love writing kitchen scenes. I find it really hard to get them authentic, Shell, but you've written some beautiful ones. I think I don't know if you were just feeling greedy, but I didn't see anything that you volunteered for this week. If I've missed it and there's something that you want me to read, then please give me a shout. Just 1 second, I'm just going to drink a touch more tea. Twinings, chamomile and lemon. It's designed to be calming, but it's actually just really soothing on the throat. They used to do one with mallow, but they don't do one with mallow anymore. I will take this moment while I am preparing my voice to read to say, Harmony put some fantastic advice on my Twitter today about what you should do before you buy anything off of a website. Because I got scammed trying to buy a communication through theatre course. So don't buy anything from a company called Full of Mind. They are scamming assholes. Oh my goodness, Shell wrote Katniss and Peter having fun in the bakery. I don't think I've read that. Please link in the chat and I will endeavour to make sure that the little robot doesn't kick you out for it. I won't read it on this one because I have not practiced my Katniss and Peter. Embarrassingly, I have not practiced my Katniss and Peter since I read those stories to my eldest. It's a bit like the Hermione stuff when it comes to Hunger Games stuff. I can read it, but I get a bit weird and uncomfortable about spicy scenes because I honed those voices reading with my eldest. Like, I can absolutely be Draco Malfoy whenever you want. And I could be Hermione Granger without even thinking about it. But the thought of making them do spicy things is just a bit weird. Right. This takes place in a fictional town of Wayne County in northeastern Pennsylvania, and while it also experienced a devastating flood years prior to the 1955 one, it was also affected during that one. Wayne County is one of my favourite spots to go. I had family living there. I usually go once a year to visit, so this is a bit of a love letter to an area full of mountains, farms, including dairy, forest, and some of the cleanest waterways I've ever seen. Some of the characters use country lingo, which might seem like it doesn't belong in the northeast of the US, but in this area it's not uncommon. Shell, I haven't heard of the Katniss Chronicles. I'm not sure if I should read them or not. I mean, I'm gonna. You know I'm gonna, because you've told me about them now. If Hunger Games was your first fandom, Shell, then I'm just glad that it brought you to us, because in previous weeks, I have read some beautiful stories of yours, and I'm just glad that whatever brought you to writing, I'm just glad I get to read your words. Well, I guess I ain't leaving town. Ben Solo shook his head at the remains of the bridge. The river had devoured it without mercy. The third one had found like this. The weather forecast said the hurricane would stay further east, but its detour into the high mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania was leaving a path of destruction the likes of which he had never seen. He's fished and swum this river plenty in his life, but he's never seen it look so angry. Whirling with foam caps undulating an ominous roar, a fetid stench of raw earth tainted with sewage and fuel laying heavy in the air. Ben wanted to check on his neighbours, but cell service and phone lines were down. He could see the tattered remains of an old building on the far side of the watery maelstrom and shook his head. The building was nowhere near the river on any other day. He hoped Hux had nothing important stored there. If his barn hadn't been further uphill, Hux could have easily lost his cattle. After shaking out his umbrella, Ben stepped on the footbed of his pickup truck and hauled himself up. Above the roar, a harrowing scream shook him right to his bones. He turned toward the river, thinking it was Hux. His wife rose and saw something that sunk his gut. Like a whale that didn't belong on the river, a hatchback bobbed precariously in the muddy torrent and lodged itself in a section of trees. They once stood majestic, but were nothing but twigs in the floodwaters. The car's front end tipped down, and moments later flailing arms amidst another shriek angled out of the driver's side window. Oh, shit. Even if the phone service wasn't out, there was no way the fire department could even get to her, let alone in enough time. The car started sinking as a soaking wet body scrambled for purchase on its slick roof. There was no time for anything, especially thinking. His late father always told him, "Kid, times are going to come when you can't be bothered thinking things through, but when they do, there's a part of you that will always rise to the occasion, and that part's got Solo branded all over it." Ben leapt to the truck bed, flung open the storage chest. He'd hoped he wouldn't have to pull out the cow rescue kit. Luckily, the barn sustained no damage, and none of the herd escaped despite the downed trees and broken fence. But this time, the huge coil of rope usually meant for wrangling a meandering bovine could be used in a life-or-death split decision. He tied the end to the hitch that on better days would bring his fishing boat to the river, and on the other end he knotted a loop, tied the free dangling length to an empty plastic gas container he'd been meaning to fill, and glad he didn't. It wasn't the best rescue kit he'd ever seen, but it was better than nothing. With his lifeline in hand, Ben ran with all the strength his powerful legs brought him toward the edge of the floodwaters. There he assessed what the hell he was going to do. The thin woman tried to grasp at the tips of those trees while her car bucked and shifted beneath her. Fuck. There was no way he could throw the rope out to her, and her position upstream meant he couldn't swim toward her. Damn, if only he'd brought his boat out. No time to get it now. "Hold on!" he cried as he slipped his arm through the loop of the rope. He had to assure her he was there, let her know she wasn't alone. Her huge, terror-filled eyes turned to him, and she screamed for help just as her car rolled in the torrent and slipped out beneath her. Her sobbing cries broke his heart as she gripped the swaying branches with all her might. How those trees held up this long was anyone's guess, and he didn't want to think about the inevitable. He didn't have to. The current ripped at her body while she clung desperately, but her hands kept slipping further down the branch. Like Dad always said, sometimes the Solo in you just has to take over in order to see things through. Whatever ran in his blood, the kind that propelled his father through the rodeo circuit and later in some questionable dealings that had him skirting the law, Ben ran towards the jagged remains of the bridge, rope unwinding in spirals behind him. Concrete gave way to steel beams as the scream was quickly silenced by water. Ben leapt from the edge, his entire body, heart and soul directed towards the woman, barreling towards his position. Whatever higher power existed in the universe, it was in those hands now as his body careened through the air into watery hell. Ben sucked in a breath before he dunked feet first into the water. It was warmer than he expected. Nothing like the cool, crisp mountain clear it usually was. He fought to the surface and sputtered once as he broke to the air. The current yanked him at breakneck pace, and he already set terror to his soul, but there was no time for that. Dad would always say, "Kid, worry about fear later, you got a job to do." Flapping arms were just upstream of him, so he forced everything in his arms and legs to reach her. Then that head of hers dipped beneath the surface, and he knew this was his last chance. He pushed against the water with everything in him and just grabbed where he could. The fabric caught in his hand at the last moment before she slipped past him. He hauled against a current that wanted to claim this poor girl with a passion until he could finally pull her up against him. Years ago, he'd been a lifeguard at the local summer camp, and he knew the best way to grab her would be from behind, or she'd pull him down with her. He wrangled her much smaller body up against his chest, boosting her head out of the water and onto his shoulder. She coughed and flailed. That was good. He really didn't want to be hauling an unconscious body out of the river. Or worse. "I got you," he cried, as waves splashed against his face. "Grab hold of the can, all right?" His panicking arms wrapped around her red lifeline. Perfect. The calmer she was, the easiest this would go. "I'm going to need you to just kick. Help me out here. Keep yourself floating and just kick. Can you do that, sweetheart?" She didn't answer, but her legs pounded the water. Good. They had to stay close to the surface until they could get to a shallower portion. Too many things could be lying beneath the opaque brown that had claimed his favourite river. He held her against him, paddling and kicking, and she kicked along. Her terrified gasps of breath, both of relief and heartbreak. Poor thing. He needed to just get her the hell out of his monster and onto dry land. Ben's feet finally hit solid ground, with one hand gripping the rope and the other cradling the woman. He hauled himself upright. The ground mushed beneath each step, and every time he slipped she would scream and sob. But he wasn't letting her go, no. Nothing was taking this woman from his arms. Finally, they pushed out of the water and onto land. The sod broke off in chunks beneath his feet, and he was having the worst of trouble climbing up the rest of the hill while she slipped beside him. Another weak patch took them both down into the mud. The woman kicked and screamed as she slid down toward the water again, but he pulled her back up and held her against his chest. There they lay and breathed. Maybe they needed that. Just breathe. Her body trembled in his arms. Panic-filled sobs rattled the poor girl. "It's all right, hon," he crooned. "You're safe now. You're safe." The rain pelted them from above. Though cold, it was cleansing and forgiving, unlike the river. They couldn't stay out for long. Her shivering would go from fear to hypothermia at any moment. Ben sat up, still holding her in his arms. "Come on, let's get you out of here somewhere dry and warm." She tried to get to her feet as he did, but the ground just kept giving beneath her. "I'm slipping!" Arms wild, Ben had no choice but to grasp her against him once more, to keep her from sliding down the hill and right back into hell. He dug his boots into the mushy earth. "I get you, sweetheart. Just hold on to me here. I got the rope. I ain't going nowhere, neither are you." Her arms squeezed his ribs, audible breaths of panic whimpering into his chest. He pulled at the rope, watching the ground to make sure he could keep his footing. It was only then he realised his shoes were missing, sucked off by the funneling current. Once he got to level ground where he knew he didn't need the rope's support anymore, he lifted her into his arms and a bridle carrier the rest of the way to the truck. She was silent as he sat her in the passenger seat. He turned the ignition and blasted the heat. Just relax there, Ben said. I gotta put the rope back. She didn't look at him, just gave a barely perceptible nod. Her eyes transfixed on the raging river below. Ben untied the rope from the hitch and threw it. The can into the truck bed, not giving a damn about it. He just had to get her out of here, away from the horror, and, well, there was really only one place to go. Ben leapt into the driver's seat and closed the door, thankful to be out of the rain, out of the river. The blasting heat felt good on his drenched body, and he took a minute to breathe, just to calm and breathe before he addressed the situation. Listen, hon, he said. Bridges are out all over on account of the storm. You ought to be looked at by a doctor or a hospital, but I can't get you over there right now. But I can offer you my home until we can get you where you need to go. It's warm and it's dry, and I promise I won't try nothing fresh. Mama told me better than that. I get a nice warm fire going, warm me right up. Silence, no movement. Just breathing and trembling. And a nod and a whisper of, please. Ben nodded. All right then. He turned the truck away from the river, glad to get that visual out of his sight, let alone hers. It was a short ride home. Barely enough time to warm anything. She didn't speak, and he shook her head at any question. But he at least got a name. Ray. The tree-lined driveway welcomed him home, and he was glad none of them fell during the storm. He never would have been where he was at just the right time to save the poor woman. When he got out of the truck, his boots squished and sloshed inside. God, he couldn't wait to get them off, as well as his sopping clothes. But first things first, he opened the passenger side door. I know you ain't got no shoes and the gravel's rough. Let me carry you the rest of the way, okay? Her nod was a little stronger. He gathered her in his arms. She felt like nothing as she clung to his neck. Up on the porch, he set her down to get the door open. Held it for her. Ray just stood there in a daze, and Ben was really starting to worry for her. It's all right. Come on. It's warm inside. She nodded, but didn't move except to tremble so violently her teeth chattered. Ben gently grasped her shoulders and led her indoors. In that moment, he really could have kicked himself for keeping the house so damn cool all the time. Sure, it was warmer than outside, but Ray just continued to shiver, tears sparkling from her lashes as she hugged herself. Ben quickly stacked wood inside the fireplace over a starter and set it alight. Power's out, phone lines too, and I got the big generator going for essentials. We can use the lights, but gonna mostly stick to lanterns. Keep from taxing the generator too hard. Reckon most of what I gotta wear will be gigantic on you, but I'll find you something dry, I promise. The shower's down the hall. No water, no. Ben sighed. Are you sure, hon? The flood warner ain't no good. Ray let out a panicking set of cries at the point that she seemed she couldn't catch her breath. Ben put his hands up. Okay, I understand, sweetheart. You just stay here by the fire. We'll be licking up soon, and I'll find you something nice and dry. Just give me a moment. Ray nodded and whimpered. Ben dashed to his bedroom and tore open his dresser and grabbed a quick set of clothing for himself, planning to shower later once he got her settled, but desperately needing to get out of his dripping clothes. For her, he pulled out a black long-sleeve shirt and red sweatpants, always a little too trim on his thick thighs. They had a drawstring that pulled pretty tight. It'll have to do. He didn't think he was gone long, but he returned to find her shaking and sobbing. I can't get warm. She sucked in a breath. I'm just so cold. Ben carried the clothing and towel towards her. I know, sweetheart. Let me show you where the bathroom is once you get out of those wet clothes. I don't want to leave the fire. Ben swallowed. Well, all right. How about you get changed right here, and I'll use the bathroom, turn the heat up a bit. You let me know when you're dressed, okay? Ray nodded. He zipped out of the room, dressed his drenched clothing in the clawfoot tub, ran a quick towel over his hair before she called him again. Ben found her wrapped up in every blanket on the couch, still shaking. Would you like some tea or coffee, warm milk? I might have some soup if you're hungry. I don't want to be alone. Desperation in her voice compelled him to want to do anything to help her, calm her. Well, okay. Please sit with me. I'm so cold. I can't be warm. She opened her mouth to speak again and just froze as tears streamed down her cheeks. I'm so scared. I don't want to be alone. Okay, he whispered, drawing in slowly toward the couch. He wasn't sure how comfortable he felt about all this. He was just a stranger to her. She just went through probably the worst experience of her life, and now she was stuck having to rely on some man twice her size with no other recourse. He wanted to help her, damn, if she wasn't a pretty little thing, now he got a good look at her. But he didn't want to scare her either. Gingerly, he sat on the couch and Ray, not so gingerly, scrambled towards him and into his arms. Her head pressed against his chest, wrapped in the bundle of blankets. She nuzzled into his embrace and just wept, as if finally comfortable and free to do so. With his free hand, he stroked her damp tresses while she heaved and wailed, the gravity of it all finally hitting her, he supposed. Before the roaring fire, he simply held her, warming up himself as their body heat melded from one another. Her tears abated, she nestled into his embrace, quieting into comfort. And he in turn started to ease. He really wanted a shower, but she so desperately clung to him. He didn't want to leave her. And so he held her as the radiant heat from the fire permeated right to their very bones. Ray said nothing more, and in time her body grew heavy, deep breath signaling that she'd fallen asleep. That sparked a certain sense of relief. The poor girl needed to rest and relax, and if he could give her that, all the better. Yeah, a shower, dinner, all things that'd be wonderful right now, but he didn't dare disturb her. Besides, it wasn't every day a beautiful woman clung to his chest like this. And his house had been awful lonely lately. Bran sprung awake when Ray startled in his arms. She looked around in panic, but seeing the fire, the room, and then him, she settled back down. Are you all right there, hon? He asked in his softest voice. Her head nuzzled back into his chest. A little better. I didn't know where I was. I thought She shook her head. Just glad I'm here. Can I get you some to eat or drink? She didn't answer, and he nestled into the valley between his pecs. After a few minutes and some deep breaths, she sighed. Maybe I'll try that shower now. I'm sorry about before, I was just panicking. You don't need to explain things to me. Come on, let me show you where everything is. While she showered, Ben dug deep in his freezer and found a container of soup he'd made using his mother's famous recipe. It always warmed right down to the bones. While that heated, he made a quick batch of noodles to go along with it. During this, all he could think was her body pressed against his, the delicate curve of her cheeks, the soft way her eyes looked when she wasn't in the throes of terror. He could think all he wanted, but he'd keep his hands to himself. His mother may have called his father a scoundrel more than a few times, but she had made sure to raise her son to be a gentleman. Maybe his teen years weren't so great. Getting caught up in drug peddling in Scranton, an enforcer in Snoke's drug empire, Ben renamed himself Kylo Ren and did quite well for himself, until the law caught up to him. He almost thought he couldn't go back home, that the gentleman his mother raised wound up being a scoundrel just like his father, and she wouldn't want him anymore. He couldn't have been more wrong. Leia Organa Solo's past as Manhattan Assistant District Attorney came in handy. Before her nerves went and she escaped to the Pocono Mountain regions of Pennsylvania, she had been one of the toughest prosecutors that the courtroom had seen in decades. Ben had thought the years as a farmer would have softened her, but when Ben was about to go down for more crimes than he committed, she stood beside him, got him a reduced sentence and brought him back home, back to his roots in the dairy farm she'd started with his cowboy father. Ben Solo had been given a second chance to be the son she raised, and he wouldn't ever go back to the state of the memory of that beautiful woman. They emerged some time later. Her hair flattened in drying tresses once again, but her demeanour was far different. Pink cheeks spoke of the heat from her shower, and warmed the freckles in her cheeks. She smiled softly and moved with tentative comfort. For just a moment, Ben let himself dream a future like this. God, he'd been so lonely. After Cadle left him for New York City, he'd been so busy trying to keep his family farm alive with a few hired hands. There was really no time to go looking for someone new. What if the will of fate had come to him instead? Hell of a way to do it. If so, poor Ray nearly died in the process. Ben motioned toward the chair. Hope you like the chicken soup, just like Mama used to make. Got the stove going to keep you warm. He motioned toward the pot-belly wood stove, black and stout, its gut full of flaming orange. Ray stepped toward it and rubbed her hands over the rising heat. A full smile finally warmed her doll-like face. Your home is so charming. Ben grinned and looked around. Dates back to the mid-1800s. Been around a long time. I love it. She rubbed her hands once more and settled into the chair. Chicken soup is wonderful, thank you. What can I get you to drink? Tea, coffee? Get you all the warm milk you'd ever need. He chuckled. I'm good for now. Took a spoon of the soup. This is delicious, by the way. Ben blushed. Thank you. Never strayed from her recipe. She always told me not to go soloing things that are working just fine on their own. He smirked, but I do add some fresh scallions in the spring. She giggled and looked around. Must be amazing. Ben wished she'd stick around to find out for herself. He settled down to his own bowl and tried not to stare at her, even in the quiet way they focused on the meal. He couldn't help but adore this feeling he got in her presence. It wasn't just about not being alone for once. It was her. There was a soft, warm light that flowed from her, like sunshine on summer flowers. But he had to break the silence. Listen. After I finish here, I gotta go take care of the girls and hop in the shower myself. Feel free to get comfy. Got lots of books you can read by the fire. Her face shifted, almost uncomfortable. Your daughters? What? No, talking about my cows and hens. Told you I'd get you all the milk you could ever want. Ray softened and chuckled. I'm sorry. I just threw myself into your arms and never once asked if you were married or anything. That was rude of me. Honey, you were in a state of panic. Don't you worry none. He smiled. I would have said something. He sighed. Just me and the furry and feathered here. Her smile was broad and genuine again. It struck him as so charming he missed his mouth and spilled soup down the front of his shirt. Oh, good Lord, look at me here. She answered with a giggle. I can jump in a raging river to save a loving young woman, but I can't get a damn spoon in my mouth. Ray laughed, but it faded into tension. She hung her head for a few moments. Now why did his dumbass have to bring up the flood? Your mouth goes running before your head just like your father. Mama used to tell him when his snark could get him into trouble. Her eyes finally lifted back up to his. Thank you, Ben, for everything. I never would have, I can't even. She plastered her hand to her face, her shoulders shaking. Hey, Ben stood and stepped over to her, laying the gentlest hand on her back. Hey. Don't think about that now. Don't worry about that. You're safe now. That's all that matters. Ray sniffled. You risked everything for me. Ben grinned. I'm a solo. We ride hard no matter the situation. Even right in the middle of a raging river. Wouldn't do it any other way. She smiled amidst her tears and wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his stomach. He gently stroked her hair, hoping he wasn't being too forward, but feeling just right to do so. She smelled of his shampoo and soap. Somehow that struck him with a sense of delight, like she was part of his life now. Well, it didn't hurt to dream, right? After tending his barn, Ben finally wound up in that shower he'd been aching for since returning from that fateful drive. He scrubbed himself more than he ever had, partly from knowing what was in those floodwaters, but partly preening for a woman he didn't need to be harassing with his ardour, like he was 15 once again and he about to go on a date. Only this was no date, and he had no business making her uncomfortable when she had nowhere else to go. In his rush to get clean, he forgot a fresh shirt. It'd be easy to bypass the living room and slip into the bedroom without her seeing. So that was the plan. He threw on the rest of his clothes, brushed back his long wet locks, and pulled open the door to swiftly make a beeline for the bedroom. Ben jolted as a body crashed into his, her face planting in his bare chest. He looked down with his mouth hanging open, not having expected Ray to be there. Her eyes flicked from his broad chest up to his face and back down again. His mouth was having a hard time working, but he got it going with a few pulls of the starter. I'm so sorry, I didn't know you'd be right there. Her eyes didn't leave his chest. I couldn't take being alone anymore. I just felt better knowing you were on the other side of the door. Ben nodded. Oh, okay, that's okay. Just gonna go ahead and grab a shirt. Ray swallowed. Sure. Go right ahead. They passed the rest of the evening on the couch, deciding that taxing the generator a little was worth her relaxation. He turned on the TV. Luckily he had satellite, no down lines to worry about. They put on some mindless garbage that kept their attention, so their eyelids starting getting heavy. She remained curled up at his side. He thought it was strange now that she wasn't as shell-shocked as before, but he wasn't about to complain. For a few moments in his lonely life, he wanted to pretend that this was his daily existence. When sleep would be held off no longer, Ben showed Ray to his room, kicking himself for having converted his childhood bedroom into storage. Bed's all yours. I'll take the couch. Won't be a problem. Ray shook her head. That couch is too small for you. Nah, don't worry about it, none. I'll be fine. Get some rest. You need it. She nodded, thanking him again. He watched as she crawled under the covers before he shut the door. Ben sat before the dying fire, trying not to think of Ray and how she felt in his arms all day, even with the afternoon nap fatigue lay heavy on him, and he was out before those thoughts got the better of him. Ben? It was a shaking, soft voice. He sprung up on the couch, a little disoriented, until he remembered why he was there. Ray, what's wrong then? She sucked in a panicky breath. I can't be alone. I don't want to be alone. Ben opened his arms as he sat up, not fully thinking it through as he was halfway out of it. You want to sit with us some more? Ray shook her head. Lay with me in the bedroom? That woke him up. Huh? Please, just lay next to me. His mouth took a few starts to work again. Ray, I don't want to do nothing disrespectful towards you. I don't know if this is such a good idea. It's only disrespectful if I don't want it, but I do, please. We don't have to, I'm not saying, I just... She let out a harsh breath like she'd start sobbing any moment. Please just hold me tonight. I can't sleep. I can't sleep on my own. Not after. Ben leaned forward. Are you sure this is what you want? I won't try nothing, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable neither. I just nodded vehemently. Yes, please. Ben stood, towering over her, but instead of looking intimidated, she calmed. With the softest hands on her shoulders, he led her to the bedroom. He tried to keep his breathing even and steady as he lay down on his side facing her. She slid in beside him, pulled up the blankets, curled right into his chest. This felt entirely too good. Taking a chance, a perilous chance, the kind of thing his father had made famous. He wrapped his arm over her body, pulling her close, protecting her from whatever demons kept haunting her. She didn't fight or pull away, just nuzzled in closer. After a few moments, she blurted out, I'm not stupid. Ben immediately withdrew his arm, but she grabbed it. No, I didn't mean that. That had nothing to do with you. You can keep holding me. He returned his arm, but wondered where she was going with this. What's on your mind? She sighed. I'm not one of those people who just thinks they can... Hello, dew on the grass. I'm not one of those people who thinks they can cross through the water and nothing will happen. That's not what happened. That's not how all that happened. Okay, it's okay. I'm not judging you. I never did, not even once. After a breath, her shaking voice returned. I came out here from New Jersey, all the way from the other end of Hoboken, to get away from it all. I was sick of the city, sick of working in Manhattan, sick of traffic and the foul air and the crowding of my stupid apartment, and everything I thought I was supposed to want. It's all just been a chain keeping me somewhere I've never been happy. Okay. So I rented a cabin long in advance. I've been waiting to go for ages. Nothing was going to stop me from going. I was so dead set. I ignored all that hurricane shit. Besides, it was going to scrape the coast back where I was anyway. I was better off heading west. And the cabin was perfect because it was quiet and away from everything, right by a river. And it was so clear and so beautiful. I even left my car up a little higher because I didn't want to see it. I just wanted cabin, woods, river, fresh air, quiet, just serenity. That's a fine thing to want. Made him think of his mother when she talked about how her nerves went, how she headed out to the mountains and fell in love with it, never wanting to return to the city. And I stupidly even shut off my phone for days, stuffed it in my car. I didn't want anything modern day getting in my way. I had food, a stock cabin, everything I needed. I just wanted to rest and meditate and read and unwind and breathe. Dew on the Grass says self-discovery and freedom is a banger of a Christmas story. I don't think I'm familiar with it. What fandom is that, please? She swallowed. So I never learned the storm had veered to the west. Never knew it came up so high and so strong. I heard the rain and the wind. Trees started coming down, but the cabin was far enough that I knew nothing would fall on it. Figured nothing so bad. What the hell did I know? I'd never lived near rivers like that. Didn't know how bad it could get. Worst we got was Superstorm Sandy, but that was ocean flooding. wasn't because of rain. Her voice lowered and shook. What the hell did I know? It's okay, Ben whispered. We can't know what's going to happen. I tried to sleep off the rainstorm, figured getting rest would be the best way to pass the time. And then I woke. She sucked in a gasp, her body trembling. I sat up in bed and stepped right into the water. The cabin, it was flooding. It sloshed to the window and I just panicked. It was everywhere. It was like being in the middle of a lake. I was so scared. The heaving breaths made her body just writhe in his arms, so he held her even closer. I grabbed whatever I could, just essentials. I tried to remember the path back to the car so I didn't fall into anything deeper, you know? It was up to my thighs by then and just shoving at me. God, I was so scared. But I managed up the hill to the car. It was still on dry land. But I didn't know that the river branched, taking a dark path down the other side of where my car was. So I sped off, hoping to get out of there, and just found down tree after down tree until I saw where the other branch of water met the river. My only way out. Oh, my Lord. Ben nestled his chin over her head. I didn't know what to do or where to go. I tried to turn around, but this... Oh, God, it was like a wave. Like a wave coming in, and I couldn't go anywhere or do anything, and I just froze. And I panicked, and it hit the car and just carried me down. And I kept the windows closed, helping. It would keep me floating a little until I could find a place to get out, but the water started filling in at the bottom, and then I get caught in these trees, and I knew I was doomed. Oh, God. She cried out and buried her tears in his chest. It's okay, he whispered, rubbing her back. You made it out. It's all okay now. Only because of you. She whispered back through the sobs. I'm only alive because of you. I never would have... Shh. He breathed into her hair, gently stroking that shaking, lovely back of hers. It's okay, hon. I was glad to be there for the moment for you. You're my hero. In every damn way possible, you're my hero. Her arms slipped around his chest, and he melted in her embrace, trying not to read too much into it or enjoy it too deeply. She was still in shock and aching for a life raft, an empty gas can in a storm, and he had to keep his feelings to himself, not to get too caught up in them. Oh, hon, I'm just a man who had a rope, and a crazy father who passed on his genes. Well, you were everything to me. Everything. She quieted her tears and continued. Every time I'm alone right now, I keep thinking how I felt in that cabin. The panic keeps coming back. When you're close to me, I feel so much stronger, like nothing can hurt me. You were there when I needed someone the most, and I still do. I still need you. I'm here. He breathed into her hair. I'm here for you whenever you need. Right now, I just need you. Those were the last words she said for the night, but they'd linger in his heart well into the morning. Oh. So there are 5 more chapters of this, which I'm not going to read, or 6 chapters of it, but you should 100% read Sunshine After the Storm by N. Lorden Media. It's absolutely gorgeous. So Green Umbrella came in, Dew on the Grass came in. Thank you very much for joining the stream, and I hope that you enjoyed that somewhat. It's a wonderfully dramatic reading, and I really, really enjoyed getting to read that. And although the moment in the kitchen is fleeting, it's really profound and speaks to me. Chicken soup is home. It's a heritage thing. There's a reason we call it Jewish penicillin. So, our final fic of this evening, and I'll warn you now, this is Sansan. Sorry, Dave, you signed up for porn and you've got drama. I don't think it's going to help, actually, the next one. Unless I skip to the spicy, and then... but yeah, no, that was an absolutely, like, stunningly intense story, but I love the way that chapter kind of... He's desperately trying to behave himself. Because he wants to take this all to heart immediately, because he's lonely and she's cute. But he is intensely aware of the fact that he really needs to not. And I think it's adorable. So for those who aren't aware, Sansan is Sandor Clegane Sansa Stark from the Game of Thrones fandom. And this is a modern AU called Peanut Butter. Content warning for hospitalization on this one. Apologies for not reading the content warnings for the previous story. Unless you are, I mean, there were panic attacks and storms. I will put that in the notes when I post this up, but I should have said so beforehand. Apologies. So we'll do this, and then I have a snippet from an unpublished work by an author here. It's another Sansan one. But as an author who's actually better known for their work in the Beetlejuice fandom. But yeah, we have a preview snippet of an unpublished work coming up right at the end. I'll be very interested in what self-discovery and freedom is, Jill on the Grass, but I do only read with the enthusiastic consent of the author. I'm hoping everybody knows who Sandor Clegane and Sansa Stark are. Songs of Ice and Fire fic is less obscure than it used to be after the show, but there's plenty of description in the fic if you are unfamiliar. Yeah, for anyone who might be unfamiliar, Sansa is young and very pretty, and Sandor is older and scarred and massive. Summary: there's a new tenant in Sansa's building, and he's not happy about it. She's far too happy and pretty, and she brings strangers cookies. Who does that? And this is by Islandida. Sander sat in his car, having just parked in a spot outside his apartment building. He'd just gotten home from a long night babysitting a whole bunch of drunk assholes, and all he wanted to do was go inside, shower, and sleep until it was time to do it all again. He wanted to do it without fucking meeting any more people. He fucking hated people. The bouncing gig was easy, but people were fucking annoying, and drunk people were a fucking nuisance. But right outside his building stood a moving van. Though he couldn't see the person it belonged to, he could tell that someone was carrying boxes inside. He known the apartment beneath his had stood empty for a while he hoped it would remain so a little longer. No such luck. The building only housed 6 3-bedroom apartments, his being the top floor. He knew of the other tenants, only knew 2 of them by more than name, and he fucking liked it that way. He didn't like people, and he avoided contact with them wherever possible. He knew that if he was to go in now, he'd probably run into the new tenant. With his shit luck, there'd probably be a fucking talker. So he was just going to sit here until they got done or they took a break. He watched the slight movement behind the van, and then he saw how the person was suddenly wavering beneath a stack of boxes And he cursed to himself. Fucking idiot. He wasn't sure if he was referring to them or himself as he jumped out of his truck and hurried over to the van, grabbed the boxes just as the person carrying them was about to drop them. "Oh!" He heard a female voice gasp. As he held the boxes away from that person, he almost toppled over. Apologies, that was a surprise sneezing fit. I hope I muted in time. As I'm aware, it sounds like a bullet ricochet. Oh, he heard a female gasp as he held the boxes away from that person. He almost toppled over. Not because of the weight of the boxes, they hardly weighed anything. But because staring up at him was the bluest pair of eyes he'd ever seen. And as her eyes took in his face lingering on the scarred side, she gasped, but quickly collected herself. He wanted to snarl and growl at the way she'd been looking at him. He couldn't fucking blame her. He knew how he looked. And she was the polar opposite of him. She was pretty. She was fucking beautiful. Her skin was fair and flawless. And her hair, it was the most wondrous of red. When the early morning sun rays shined and hit it, it became a prism of red and gold and brown, and he couldn't look away. "Thank you. For a second I was sure I was going to be toppled over," she said, and if he'd thought her face and her hair beautiful, it was nothing compared to her voice. It was soft and musical, and it fucking made his chest hurt. Why the fuck did his chest hurt? She was still looking at him, and he realised suddenly she wasn't just looking at him, she was smiling. It wasn't a small twitch of her lips smile, it was a wide, full-on smile at him. What the fuck? "Do you live here?" she asked in that soft, gentle voice, and he made himself nod. When had anyone ever spoken to him so gently? Probably never. He figured she expected him to say something more, but he didn't seem to be able to find any words at all. He simply nodded toward the door, and her smile widened as she grabbed one box and led the way. He'd half expected her to take the elevator, and he dreaded the awkward silence that would have entailed, but to his surprise, she bounded up the stairs. Just as he had known she would, she moved toward the empty apartment. The door was open, and she led him inside and set her box down on the kitchen counter, while motioning him to put his load down by the door. It was an exact replica of his own, with you stepping right into the living room. The living room and the kitchen were only separated by a small breakfast bar. Further down the hall was a bathroom and 2 bedrooms, one slightly smaller than the other. She didn't have a single piece of furniture, and he suspected they were all in that moving van downstairs. He shoved his hands in his pockets and looked over his shoulder at the door, his mind frantically looking for a reason to leave. He figured he didn't really need a reason. It helped her, and now he could go upstairs to his own place. But his fucking feet were rooted to the spot, and he could feel her eyes on him. "You got anyone to help you?" he heard himself rasp out, and it made him frown. Why the hell had he said that? It almost sounded as if he was offering to help her. He didn't fucking want to do that. But when he looked at her, he saw she had that fucking smile on her face again, and he knew that he'd help her if she asked him fuck. If she kept smiling at him like that, like he wasn't a scarred, ugly fucker, he'd do anything she asked of him. "Yeah, I've got movers coming around in about 30 minutes. Thank you for your help with those, though," she said as she nodded to the boxes by his feet. "Don't mention it," he said, and with a firm nod, he turned and swiftly walked out of the hallway. He practically ran up the stairs and slammed his door behind him. How was he going to be able to live his quiet life in peace when he had the most fucking beautiful woman he'd ever known living right beneath him? It felt like he'd barely closed his eyes when there was a knock on his door. He squinted his eyes to check the time on his alarm clock. He'd only been home for about 3 hours. The fuck was knocking on his door at noon? No one ever came to his apartment. Barely a handful even knew his address. He decided to ignore it, then he heard it again and cursed as he got up and pulled on a pair of sweatpants. "What?" he growled as he flung open the door. On the other side of the door stood that beautiful redhead, and she was smiling again. She seemed to always be fucking smiling, he thought. Despite only meeting her a couple of hours ago, she'd done nothing but smile at him. And if she could smile at someone who looked like him, she was probably always smiling. It wasn't as if she could think him special enough to warrant her smiles. "So this is where you live," she exclaimed happily, and he couldn't keep the frown off his face. Why would she be happy to see him? His frown didn't seem to deter her, though. She kept smiling. She held out a small plastic container. "I've been going around introducing myself to the neighbours." "Oh, fucking course she did." She seemed like just the kind of person to do something so sweet and innocent. He would have thought that shit would have ruined... the shit world would have ruined people like her by now. And yet here she stood, like everyone went around to greet their neighbours. Didn't she realise one of them could be a fucking creep or dangerous? And she was exposing herself to the risk of getting hurt with that fucking smile. How couldn't she see it? Fuck this girl. She got worried for her. He didn't even know her. She took a step closer still, holding out the container to him, and he stared down at her. "I made cookies. I thought I should give you some as a thank you for earlier," she said. And he stared at her with wide eyes. "You don't fucking owe me anything," he said. And he hated how rough and tired his voice sounded. Hers was so upbeat and light, and it didn't go with his at all. Why the fuck did he care if their voices would go together? "Fine, but I still wanted you to have them," she said. There was something firm in her eyes then. Without her saying anything, he knew she wouldn't take no for an answer. Maybe she wasn't as soft as he'd initially thought. So he grudgingly took the container. Excuse me. So he grudgingly took the container, and she raised an auburn eyebrow at him expectantly. There was a twitch at his lip, and he quickly stopped it from becoming a smile. Instead, he opened the lid and took out a cookie. It was still warm and smelled fucking amazing. He eagerly put the whole thing in his mouth, and his eagerness made her smile again. "I'm Sansa, by the way," she said softly, and he had to clear his throat as he tried to respond. But there was a sudden itch in his throat that made him clear it again. Is there peanuts in these?" he asked, and her smile widened. Why did his heart jump when she smiled at him like that? His heart was a fucking black piece of coal, and coal did not jump from the smile from a beautiful girl. "You could tell I used peanut butter, the chunky kind. It makes them so much tastier," she answered happily, and he felt his throat swell. "I'm allergic," he wheezed out, as it became harder to breathe, and the container fell from his hands. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed with horror on her face. "What can I do?" "EpiPen," he wheezed, although it would do nothing about the swelling. He couldn't keep from grasping at his throat. Where is it?" she asked, but he ignored her and turned around to head to the bathroom. He reached it just as his vision started to turn black at the edges. He threw open his bathroom cabinet, making its contents fall in the sink and on the floor. He tried to cuss out, but no sound left his lips. He sunk down to his knees. Fuck. He needed to calm down and find that pen. His throat was quickly getting worse, and he was having trouble focusing his eyes. He saw a flash of red as someone kneeled next to him, and he wanted to grovel at her to leave it alone, but wasn't able to say anything. "Here," she said, and she exclaimed, and held up the EpiPen in one hand. "What do I do? I've never done this before." With a growl, he snatched it out of her hand. As soon as he got the lid off, jammed the pen into his thigh. She jumped at the force he used, but to his surprise stayed at his side, her face frantically looking at his. He could feel the medicine stopping the reaction. But she was shaking, and he didn't know why, but he didn't want her scared. He had been the one to almost fucking die, yet he was the one to reach out his hand to clasp hers. Her eyes darted back down to the contact, and when she squeezed his hand, He only had one thought in his head before the world turned black. I'm so fucked. Chapter 2 is where the hospitalisation comes in. Hospitalised. Apologies for the muting, causing issues with people checking their tabs. I'm still here, I just don't want to sneeze in your ears. It's very loud and very squeaky. I think that's all of the autonomous bodily reactions dealt with. And so they're quite short chapters. I'm going to do a little bit more of this one, and then I've got the... I was going to do a little bit more of this one, but I don't think we've got time, actually. So, yeah, that was... I'm not going to go into the hospital chapter. But, yeah, that's Food as Connection. Hi, Shell. I'm glad I didn't sneeze in your ear. So that, yes, Food as Connection and food as an adjutant. And as you read the rest of the story, you'll see... Oh, it's probably been a bit loud for you there. Just realised I just nudged the slider. Is that a little bit better? Yeah, as you read the rest of the story, if you go in and read the rest of the story, it's also kind of food as a catalyst. So yeah, do read the rest of Peanut Butter by Aslandia. And I will say, as I always say, please, when we are reading fanfic in the stream, do go comment. If you finish the stories, comment. Let the authors, the writers, know how much you have enjoyed their work. And in the case of when we have read from a book, I mean, these days novels are, especially if we are getting them from as ebooks. If you don't want to go and buy it, you can always request it at your local library. Keep books in circulation. Keep writers fed. So, our last little treat of the evening is unreleased as yet. Very exciting. It's called I Just Want to Start a Flame in Your Heart. And it is by a writer called The Art of Suicide. Much better known for their work in the Beetlejuice universe. This work has yet to be released, and it is a work in the... Excuse me. In this is the work in the Game of Thrones universe. So it's a Sansa story. So this is kind of... I'm not sure I can get to the bit where food is relevant without spoiling the rest of the story. So I'm just going to give you the intro chapter. We've also only got 15 minutes left. So, but yeah, this is basically, it's a modern AU. It's a bachelorette style AU. If people are not familiar with the concept, I genuinely am only familiar with the concept because fanfic. It's where there's one guy and lots of women. So yes, the Bachelor. Sorry, not the Bachelorette. One guy and lots of women competing for him, rather than the other way around. Xander watched through the camera, cigarette dangling, a glass of signature sour red in his hand. As 15 of the most beautiful women Westeros had to offer filed out of the bus parked in front of his rented Lannisport mansion, and grimaced. The draw was obvious. What man wouldn't want to be fawned, doted on and fought over by a pack of inked, surgically enhanced sluts? Not to mention the money. Funds didn't last forever, and the man didn't tour as often anymore. It didn't take much work for his manager and that Baelish fuckwit to sell him on the idea. On one condition. Sander controlled everything. Nothing would air without his approval, and he had final say on eliminations, though he was open to suggestions. He would not be humiliated on national television. If one of these fame-hungry got their feelings hurt, he would not be sensationalised by her shrieking over how she was too good for his ugly, scarred mug anyway. No, this was Sander's game, and each one of these girls his pawns. How many of them, if any, actually thought it was real, that it was possible to win? The producers certainly didn't. He was signed on for a 3-season deal. What a fucking joke. Should be a good time, at least. In the grainy CCTV spied 2 raving beauties. A golden blonde with a stylish pixie cut, and a brunette with a sleek undercut, already at each other's throats. The blonde was unzipping her leather jacket, the brunette removing her earrings. Look out, Tor. A wolfish grin was cracked at the other impossibly large man at his side. Tormund was taller, but Sander had a touch more muscle and girth. He'd served well as Sander's head of security for a good many years and will continue serving there. Looks like you'll be earning your paycheck. Sansa was last off the bus, taking in the other contestants. She fiddled with the lace hem of her cornflower sundress, with a blush rose floral print that she thought oh so cute and clever, and regretted her choice. Everywhere she looked it was skin-tight leather. 4 slashes, animal print, exotic piercings and tattoos. She knew she was a pretty girl, she'd been told so all her life, but here among this pack of femme fatales she felt downright plain. Of course she wasn't a complete fool, she knew the type of women she'd be competing against, and I thought the edgier touches of clunky back combat boots and a tasteful lace choker would give her enough of a look to belong, but it was a feeble attempt. The pretty little fire opal encrusted septum ring adorned her freshly pierced nose, chosen to complement her eyes, and here felt disingenuous. Anyone who looked long enough would tell she was in way over her head. Before any of them got to meet Sander or even leave the driveway and enter the mansion, they were taken one by one to the bus for brief introductory shots. Just tell us a little about yourself, Miss Stark. Why do you think the Hound should choose you? The balding, kindly cameraman coaxed. Don't be nervous. Davis Seaworth had been filming reality TV long enough to know the difference between the Marjorie Tyrell and a Sansa Stark at first glance. Girls like Marjorie were trained from birth for this, walked into the room as if the cameras were there for her alone. There were no need to handle her with kid gloves. Sansa Stark was a different animal. I like to sing, she said finally, a coy lip bite the camera loved. I have a husky named Lady. She's my best friend. Everyone says he likes dogs. Animals are better than people, I think. I know I'm not a party girl, one might say, but I really think we could make a connection. I haven't had a lot of luck with love. Davos chuckled. Don't worry, you're still young, lass. That's a wrap. Go and join the group. Hound will be out to greet you all soon enough. Their cell phones had been collected at the airport, so no one had anything to do to distract themselves from the competition. The girls had already begun organising themselves. The Mirandas, Royce and Bolton, dubbed for their shared first name, were shrieking in laughter, while Cersei Lannister herself boasted that her father owned the mansion across the street. It had been a big pill to swallow seeing Cersei at the airport, accepting she was here and part of this. But Sansa resolved to firmly ignore the lioness. Cersei appeared to be on the same wavelength. Please don't pick her, Sander, anyone but her. A group of scantily clad vixens, Shay, Ross, Alera and Melisandre, bonded over their shared experience working in gentlemen's clubs. Sansa was ashamed to find herself relieved to seeing a trio of rather homely girls who claimed a different spot on the pavement. She wasn't the ugliest girl there. Hello there. Sansa startled and went speechless. The most beautiful woman she'd ever seen was standing in front of her, talking to her. Shimmering locks fell in a platinum waterfall around thin bronze shoulders decorated with faint silver tattoos, lilac eyes gleaming beneath a fringe of dark lashes. I'm Daenerys Targaryen. You may have heard of my father? Who hadn't? Mad King Aegis Targaryen was infamous among rock and roll nobility, known for fatally setting himself and other members of his group Wildfire aflame during a show in King's Landing some 20-odd years back. Dany would have had to have been so young when it happened. Sansa didn't know anything of his children, or that he had any, so Daenerys' identity, paired with her stunning looks, was a shock. You can call me Dany. This is all so crazy, isn't it? Did you ever think you'd find yourself looking for a man on television? I certainly didn't. They made small talk, Dany spearheading the conversation while Sansa was stuck ogling the long-lost rock and roll princess, dumbstruck until the gorgeous girl moved on. It wasn't until she was mingling cattily with Cersei and the Mirandas that Sansa realised she hadn't even introduced herself. The cameras were on, watching them all. One in particular was trained on Daenerys' every move. The game was on. So I hope you are looking forward to that. I know that I am. I have a bit more of that to read, but it hasn't been through beta yet, and we all know what happens when I try and read stuff that hasn't gone through beta. There's nothing like stumbling over words, trigger my stutter, and then we get a cataclysm. So apologies for being... I know it's going to be fun, right? A bit of a smut light story time this evening. Our next set of stories will be on Wednesday the 3rd, and we will be ringing a cataclysm, really. We will be ringing in the new year, so 3rd of January, with what do you do in New Year's Eve? A collection of New Year's Eve stories. We do like our seasonal stories. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. The episode will be up on YouTube basically as fast as it allows me, along with the show notes, links to the fics and the books that we've read this evening. Thank you, Avienda. I very much enjoyed reading for you. Thank you, everybody, for coming along, for supporting the stream, and for volunteering your fic. As much as I did, there's a number of beautiful kitchen scenes in Homes Where the Heart Lies, but I've either already read them on the stream, or they involve so much French that I need too much practice. So, joys of the season, Happy New Year, everybody. We will be back on Wednesday the 3rd with New Year's stories. Thank you very much.